Hello everybody. Today I'm doing the fourth video and final video for the incredible edible trademarked egg series. This recipe is going to be mini lemon meringues. Now this is the last egg video for this 4-part series that I decided to do, but I had such a fun time looking for egg recipes, and because eggs are such a low cost, healthy protein, I've decided that I'm probably gonna add some other egg recipes to this one in the future. The first thing I'm gonna do is go over the equipment that you're gonna need for this recipe, and then we'll get to making the mini lemon meringues. So let's get started. Hopefully I don't fuck this up. To like the regular things you would need, like a whisk or a bowl, some specialty items that some people may not have but need to be aware that they would come in handy. The first thing is a zester. This is going to come in handy if you choose to use the zest of fresh lemons. Now I'm only going to be using the zest of fresh lemons and maybe some of the juice. I've opted for using already prepared lemon juice. It's a really good quality organic kind that I get. I don't feel like squeezing a bunch of lemons today. Now you can do this by whisking by hand, and this part is for the meringue part, but I'm gonna guarantee you it's gonna be a lot easier if you use a hand mixer or a stand mixer with a whisk attachment. The other item that you're gonna need is piping tips in a piping bag. But if you only have piping tips, you can use a 1-gallon storage bag with your piping tip. And actually, if you don't want to make them super fancy or anything, you don't even necessarily need a piping tip. You can just spoon the meringue onto the sheet pans. The other thing that might come in handy for when you're baking the meringues is a silicone baking sheet. Alternatively, you can use parchment paper, but I'm just a big fan of the silicone baking sheets. Before you get started, you're going to want to preheat your oven to 200 degrees for the meringues, because once you're done whipping the meringues, you don't want them to sit too long so that they lose the volume that you create. And that's 200 degrees Fahrenheit. First step is going to be separating the egg whites and the egg yolks. So you'll notice here I have actually 4 eggs sitting out. For the meringues, I'm gonna need 2 large egg whites. And for the lemon curd, I'm gonna need 2 large egg yolks and 2 large eggs. So this is going to be for the curd, and I'm going to separate the yolks and the whites. Now the best way to do egg separation, especially when it comes to making something like a meringue, is to do them one at a time and separate them like so. And I know this isn't probably a very recommended way to separate your eggs, because salmonella actually exists on the exterior of the egg. So if this egg had salmonella contamination, by doing this, I would raise the risk of contaminating these eggs. However, these are pasteurized eggs from the grocery store, and in addition to that, this dish will be cooked, so the risk of salmonella is very, very small. Oh, and see, this is why I should have done this differently. All right. You don't want to get any of the yolk in the egg whites. That will make it so that when you whip the egg whites, it won't flake as well. You want to make sure that there's no fat that gets in your egg whites, because it will basically destroy your meringue. It won't be as beautiful, it won't be as voluminous, so that's really important. The recipe calls for a tablespoon of lemon zest. So when you zest, you just want to take off a bit of the surface. You don't want to get down to the pith, which is where it starts getting really white, because that will be bitter. The skin of the lemon is actually where all the really good flavorful oils exist. And this calls for about 1 tablespoon. So one tip to make sure that your egg whites have a chance to get as much volume as possible when you whip them is to let your eggs come to room temperature before you start whipping them. As per food safety regulations, you don't want your egg whites to sit out for any more than 2 hours. But I'm gonna be honest, I've let eggs sit out for much longer before I've used them, and it's usually pretty fine. But just make sure that if you have any health conditions or anything, that you're always adhering to food safety standards. So you want to put these in a bowl and whisk until they get foamy. As you can see, the egg whites have become foamy. Next, you want to add a pinch of salt. And I would say a pinch of salt is about 1/8 of a teaspoon. You want to increase this to medium-high for a couple seconds and then gradually add the sugar. I'm using 1/3 cup of erythritol sugar. It's an erythritol monk fruit mix because I don't use real sugar very often. If you wanted to use real sugar, you should use 2/3 cup of real sugar. Despite the fact that most packagings for erythritol and monk fruit sugar say they're a 1-for-1 sugar substitute, that is not true. This product happens to be very much more sweet than real sugar. Now I'm going to continue to add the sugar slowly and beat this on medium-high until the egg whites become thick and glossy. And then I'm going to continue to beat until they hold a stiff peak. And I'll show you what that is when I get to that point. I'm not sure if you can see, it's glossy, and that's considered a stiff peak. Now that you have it, your egg whites a stiff peak, you want to add the lemon zest and 1 teaspoon of vanilla, and you just want to fold that in. Folding goes about like this. Go around the edge and down the center. Rotate the bowl down the center, around the edge. And you just keep working it like that. This is so you don't deflate the egg whites too much, because if you were to just stir this in like anything else, you would lose quite a bit of the volume. This is going to be the tricky part. You're going to want to spoon or scoop your egg whites into your piping bag. Roll back to the size of your piping bag like that so that you don't get any of it on the upper end. And I'm just going to start with a large tablespoon. If you're on your own and you don't want to have to hold it too much, I'd say just use a glass, and then you can be a little bit more effective in your scooping. Now that you've got your mixture in the piping bag, make sort of nest-like shape on your parchment paper or your silicone baking mat. Pipe a silver dollar-sized circle from the center outward, making sure it's solid so it will hold the curd. Following that, pipe another layer around the outside edge, leaving a nest in the middle. Bake on oven racks placed on the upper and middle level of your oven for 60 to 75 minutes. The recipe for this is in the description below. It says that it's going to make 12 to 2 dozen meringues, and as you could see when I piped out the meringue bases, it was going to be nowhere near that size. Perhaps I piped them a little too big. I guess a silver dollar is about that big, and then when you put a ring around it, it gets a little bigger, but I don't really see a way that that recipe would yield a dozen, let alone 2 dozen. So this is an important thing to remember when you find recipes online. There is an off chance that whoever made them didn't test it, especially if they adapted it. I'm not saying that the woman who posted this recipe didn't make them. I'm just saying that, especially when it comes to serving sizes, always keep in mind that it's not always gonna work out like you think it is. So if you're making a recipe for a big crowd, it's probably best to take the initial recipe, make it once, see how much it actually produces, and then scale the recipe up from that. Next, we're going to get started on my favorite part, the lemon curd. So the ingredients for this lemon curd include 1/2 cup of lemon juice, 1/2 cup of sugar. I'll be using 1/3 cup of the erythritol monk fruit sugar substitute, 2 large eggs, 2 large egg yolk, pinch of salt, and 6 tablespoons of butter. First thing you want to do is add the lemon juice and the sugar. salt. I'm just gonna stir this up in order to dissolve the sugar a little bit before I add the egg yolks. Make sure you don't get any shell in there. And then whisk this up really well. Turn your stove onto about medium heat. Temperature that you're gonna want to use depends on the power of your stove. If you're using a gas stove, this would definitely be easier because you'll have more control over the temperature. You're gonna wanna stir this over medium heat until it starts getting thick. And once it gets thick enough, I'll show you what that looks like on the back of a spoon. So this recipe actually tells you to add the butter after you've whisked together all the other ingredients. And that is not how I was taught how to make a curd in culinary school. And anytime that I've actually added the butter before the egg mixture has thickened, it has not turned out as it should. So once you get to that part of the recipe, just make sure that you don't add the butter right after you've whisked everything. Wait until it comes to the thickness that I'm gonna show you. As you can see, the mixture is starting to thicken. Oops, that's too fast. It thickens super fast. Right when I lifted it off there, it almost got too thick. Ideally, I would have had this butter cut up into about 1 tablespoon thick squares, but that happened way faster than I was expecting. One of the things about putting the butter in at this point is that it will bring the temperature of the eggs way down, so it'll prevent much of the curdling that can happen. I'm just gonna set this on the trivet here while I get a jar, put the curd in. What you wanna do is get a pint jar, and then you'll put the curd in this pint jar, cover the top with plastic wrap, and then leave it on the counter to come to room temperature before refrigerating it. If you've watched my video on eggs and you saw the food safety tip, you'll know why you want to let all foods that are hot come to room temperature before putting them in the refrigerator. You'll see the butter is almost melted. So now you put the mixture into a strainer or a sieve. This will just eliminate any scrambled eggs that may have occurred in the process. Now always make sure to turn this over so you don't miss out on all this yummy, yummy, yummy stuff at the bottom. And then we'll transfer this into a glass jar. Oop. If you didn't fill your jar all the way up to the top, make sure to press this down onto the surface so that you don't form a thick lemony skin. The meringues still have 35 minutes left in the oven. You'll know when to take them out when the edges are slightly crispy and no longer sticky, but chewy and airy on the inside, which granted is going to be hard to determine unless you try one. If it still looks wet and frothy on the outside, then it is not done. And if it's dry and crispy from the edges to the center, then it's overcooked. I'm just gonna let the meringues finish baking. They're gonna have to cool off on a rack on the counter for probably 45 minutes. The lemon curd is gonna sit out on the counter, come to room temperature, and then I'll put that in the refrigerator. After those two things cool, I'll come back and we'll assemble the mini lemon meringues. If you haven't watched my first video on eggs, go back to the first episode of this 4-part series and learn all about the great health benefits of eggs. There are several different ways to prepare eggs, and they include all of the following ways: hard-boiled, soft-boiled, hard-scrambled, soft-scrambled, sunny side up, over easy, over medium, poached, baked, basted, pickled. You can even make meringues and marshmallows, custard, puddings, mayonnaise. You can use eggs to thicken sauces and make frostings.
That's about it.
Okay, the meringues finished baking. They did not turn out like I hoped they would, in a lot of different ways. But again, this is the risk with finding a recipe online. Next time I think I'm gonna go to just straight to my culinary school cookbooks and take recipes out of there. I am still gonna assemble them. They are still edible. They just aren't as beautiful as I would like. So let's assemble them and give them a taste. Okay, first of all, it looks like they leaked something. So I'm not sure what that is. It could be because I use erythritol sugar, but I have made meringues before with erythritol, and this didn't happen. I had used a different recipe. I don't know. They're very crispy. I stopped them before the alarm went off, which was 5 minutes shorter than it had called for, and they still were overdone. Yeah, so these did not turn out anything like I wanted them to, and the proportions seem a little crazy. The recipe was supposed to make, like I said, 1 to 2 dozen, and it made 7.5. And then there's that much of the curd left over, which, I mean, let's be honest, I'm gonna mix this with yogurt and it's gonna be a happy weekend for me. But if you were making these for guests, I can imagine that you would not be thrilled with what these look like. So while I put the recipe in the description, just keep in mind, they may not turn out how you want them to turn out. I mean, they're still gonna be edible. I think I got lemon curd in my hair. Yeah, I got lemon curd in my hair and on my face. I'm gonna try one of these and see what it tastes like. Too crunchy. The flavors are good. If you overcook these, you could even crunch them up and put them with yogurt and lemon curd and make sort of a I can't remember the name of the dish with cake bits and custard and stuff, but you can do that. In any case, I guess this is a fail. Obviously, not my first recipe fail, but definitely gonna revisit this again in the future. Thank you for watching this 4th video. If you haven't watched any of the other ones, wait till the end of the outro and there will be a link for you to watch that playlist. If you liked any of those videos, please like and share. I'm gonna say don't share this video. It is not awesome. Please subscribe for future videos and turn on the notifications so you get a notification whenever I drop a new video. I do a lot of different things on this channel. I'm going to be renovating my kitchen this fall. I'm going to be finishing a trailer project that I started recently. There's a whole bunch of other things. Thank you so much for watching and have a fantastic day.